Have you ever wondered how one selfless act could change the course of two lives forever? What if a moment of kindness not only saved someone from despair, but also brought unexpected love into your life? This is the story of a man who had everything but felt empty inside, and a woman who had nothing but an unbreakable spirit. Jonathan, a wealthy businessman, had always lived by a simple rule: success first, emotions later. But everything changed one cold winter night when he stopped to help a woman in need. Emily, homeless and fighting to survive, was used to being invisible to the world around her. Their chance encounter sparked a series of events that would transform them both in ways they never expected. Have you ever felt like life gave you more than you could handle? Or like you were missing something you couldn't quite name? Jonathan's journey mirrors the struggles many of us face: the battle between chasing external success and finding true fulfillment. And Emily's story reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit, even in the darkest times. Together, they show us that the most valuable treasures in life aren't material, but the connections we make with others. Jonathan Miller was the kind of man people envied. At just 38, he had built a business empire from the ground up, earning him the title of one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city. His name was synonymous with ambition and luxury. He drove the finest cars, lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the skyline, and attended galas filled with the city's elite. But beneath the polished exterior, Jonathan carried a weight he rarely acknowledged: a profound sense of loneliness. For years, his life had been consumed by his relentless pursuit of success. Relationships? They felt like distractions. Friends? Hardly anyone he could trust. He'd traded intimacy and connection for boardroom victories and stock market gains. The emptiness, however, was growing harder to ignore. On the other side of town, Emily Carter lived a life Jonathan couldn't even begin to imagine. Once a promising art student with dreams of showcasing her paintings in galleries, Emily's life had taken a sharp and tragic turn. A family tragedy left her alone and struggling. One bad break followed another until Emily found herself homeless, with nothing but a few belongings stuffed into a tattered backpack. For Emily, every day was a battle. The biting cold, the indifferent glances of strangers, the endless hunger. It all seemed like a cruel test of her spirit. Yet, despite her circumstances, Emily refused to give up. There was still a spark of hope within her, no matter how dim it seemed. It was a cold December night when their worlds collided. The streets were silent except for the occasional gust of wind and the distant hum of traffic. Jonathan had just left a business dinner that had run late. Driving his sleek black car through the dimly lit streets, he was eager to get home and escape the frost biting at his fingers. But as he turned a corner, his headlights caught something, or someone, sitting on the curb. It was Emily, huddled under a thin blanket. For a moment, Jonathan thought of driving past. After all, he had deadlines to meet, meetings to prepare for. But something stopped him. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping out of his car hesitantly. His voice startled Emily, who looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and surprise. She hesitated, unsure of whether to trust this stranger in a tailored suit. What began as a simple offer to buy her a warm meal turned into something far more complex. Emily, hardened by years of survival, was reluctant to accept help. And Jonathan, unaccustomed to opening himself up to others, was unsure why he felt compelled to help her. As they shared a meal at a nearby diner, Emily's guard began to lower, and Jonathan found himself intrigued by her honesty and resilience. For the first time in years, he felt a connection, raw and unfiltered. But this wasn't going to be easy. Jonathan's privileged world and Emily's harsh reality couldn't have been more different. Little did they know, this small act of kindness was about to set both of them on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and unexpected love. After their chance meeting, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Her story, her resilience, and the sadness in her eyes lingered with him long after he returned to his luxurious penthouse. For someone who had always prided himself on being logical and emotionally detached, this new sense of compassion unsettled him. The next evening, Jonathan returned to the same street where he had found Emily, but she was gone. It took him several days of asking around and searching the area before he finally found her sitting on the steps of a rundown community shelter. She was surprised to see him again. "Why are you here?" she asked warily. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like to help if you'll let me." Emily hesitated. Years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious, but there was something in Jonathan's voice that felt genuine. Slowly, she agreed to let him help her, starting with a warm meal and a place to stay for the night. Jonathan booked her a room at a modest motel, insisting that she take her time to rest and recover. But this wasn't a fairy tale. Emily's pride and independence often clashed with Jonathan's well-meaning, but sometimes overbearing gestures. She didn't want to feel like a charity case, and Jonathan struggled to understand her need to maintain dignity despite her circumstances. "You don't have to do this," Emily told him one day as he dropped off groceries for her at the motel. "I want to," Jonathan replied. "But why?" she pressed. "People like you don't usually notice people like me." Her words stung more than he cared to admit. Jonathan realized that his wealth had shielded him from the harsh realities that people like Emily faced daily. He was beginning to see the world through her eyes, and it was both humbling and overwhelming. As weeks turned into months, their relationship evolved. Jonathan began to spend more time with Emily, learning about her past and the dreams she had once held dear. He encouraged her to revisit her love for art, even going so far as to buy her a small set of paints and a sketchbook. At first, Emily resisted. She hadn't touched a brush in years and didn't think she was capable of creating anything meaningful anymore. But Jonathan's quiet encouragement gave her the confidence to try again. One evening, she showed him a simple sketch, a portrait of a child she had seen at the shelter. "This is incredible," Jonathan said, his eyes lighting up. "It's just a sketch," Emily replied, but there was a flicker of pride in her voice. For Jonathan, watching Emily rediscover her passion was inspiring. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was doing something truly meaningful, helping someone rebuild not just their life, but their sense of self-worth. However, their growing bond wasn't without its challenges. Jonathan's colleagues and friends began to notice his change in behavior. "Who is this woman?" one of his business partners asked pointedly during a dinner meeting. "She's a friend," Jonathan replied curtly, but the judgment in their eyes was unmistakable. His association with Emily, a homeless woman, didn't fit into the polished, high-society image they expected from him. Meanwhile, Emily struggled with her own insecurities. "You don't owe me anything," she told Jonathan one evening. "I'm just me. You're a millionaire with a life I'll never fit into." "You're wrong," Jonathan said firmly. "You've given me something money never could, a sense of purpose." Despite their differences, they found themselves drawn closer together. Jonathan's world of luxury and Emily's world of survival were miles apart, but somehow they found common ground in their shared humanity. One evening, Emily invited Jonathan to a charity art exhibit being held at the community shelter. At first, he was hesitant. He had never been to a neighborhood like this, let alone an event where he wouldn't know anyone. But Emily was insistent. "You've been helping me so much," she said. "Maybe it's time you saw the world through my eyes." When Jonathan arrived at the shelter, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the opulent galas he was used to. The walls were lined with simple, yet heartfelt artwork created by people who had experienced homelessness. Emily's sketches were among them, and Jonathan was stunned by the raw emotion in her work. As he wandered through the room, he noticed how the community rallied around one another, offering support and kindness without expectation. It was humbling, and for the first time, Jonathan felt out of place. Not because he was judged, but because he realized how disconnected he had been from this kind of humanity. The turning point came when Emily's sketch sold to a buyer who admired her talent. The small sale wasn't about the money. It was a validation of her worth, a reminder that she still had something to offer the world. Jonathan watched as Emily's face lit up with pride, and in that moment, he realized just how much he cared for her. That night, Emily and Jonathan sat on the steps outside the shelter, looking up at the stars. For the first time, Emily opened up about the weight of her struggles. "When I lost everything, I thought I'd lost myself, too," she said softly. But meeting you, it's like I'm starting to remember who I was. Jonathan reached for her hand. You've always been that person, Emily. You just needed someone to remind you. The vulnerability of that moment brought them closer than ever. But it also left Jonathan questioning his own life. He had spent years chasing material success, yet he couldn't remember the last time he had felt truly alive. After that evening, Jonathan's perspective shifted. He began to see his wealth as a tool, not an end goal. He started funding initiatives at the shelter, offering job training and resources for those in need. But he didn't stop there. He also began reflecting on his own life choices. Inspired by Emily's resilience, Jonathan decided to step back from his relentless work schedule. He delegated more responsibilities to his team and took time to rediscover his own passions. He even started painting alongside Emily, finding solace in the creative process. Their relationship deepened as they supported each other through their respective journeys. For Emily, it was about rebuilding her life and self-worth. For Jonathan, it was about reconnecting with the parts of himself he had long ignored. But as they grew closer, their bond faced a new challenge. Jonathan's business partners grew increasingly impatient with his distractions. One partner confronted him, saying, "You've changed, Jonathan, and not for the better. This woman is pulling you down." Meanwhile, Emily overheard a conversation between two of Jonathan's colleagues at a dinner party. "She doesn't belong here," one of them whispered. "She's just a charity case." The words cut deep. Emily began to question whether her presence in Jonathan's life was doing more harm than good. She didn't want to be the reason he lost the respect of his peers. One evening, Emily told Jonathan she needed time to think. "Maybe it's better if I figure things out on my own," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. Jonathan tried to argue, but he could see the determination in her face. Emily left the city, retreating to a small coastal town where she could focus on her art and rediscover herself without the shadow of Jonathan's world looming over her. The separation was painful for both of them. Jonathan threw himself into his philanthropy work, hoping it would fill the void Emily had left. But no matter how much he accomplished, something was missing. For Emily, the solitude was bittersweet. She missed Jonathan, but she also found strength in her independence. Her art flourished, and she began to gain recognition in local galleries. Months later, Jonathan attended one of Emily's gallery shows without telling her. As he walked through the exhibit, he saw her transformation reflected in her artwork. Her pieces were bold, vibrant, and full of life. When their eyes finally met across the room, everything else faded away. Jonathan walked up to her and said, "I've been chasing success my whole life, but I never knew what it meant until I met you." Emily smiled through her tears. "And I've been running from the past for so long, but you reminded me that I'm stronger than I thought." After reconnecting at the gallery, Jonathan and Emily decided to approach their relationship and their individual journeys differently this time. They understood that they couldn't build something meaningful without addressing the challenges that had strained them before. Jonathan made a conscious effort to step away from the corporate world that had consumed him. He sold off a portion of his business, keeping only what he truly enjoyed managing, and redirected his focus toward philanthropy. He launched a foundation that supported aspiring artists from disadvantaged backgrounds, a cause inspired by Emily's resilience and talent. Emily, on the other hand, found her footing in the art world. With Jonathan's unwavering support, she embraced opportunities to showcase her work, but this time, she ensured she maintained her independence. She refused to let anyone assume that her success was tied to Jonathan's influence. Even as they built their new lives together, obstacles arose. Some members of Jonathan's social circle remained skeptical of Emily. At an upscale charity event, one guest made a dismissive remark about her past, saying, "It must be nice to go from nothing to living in luxury." Emily felt the sting of those words, but refused to let them define her. Instead of shrinking back, she responded with grace. "My journey has been anything but easy," she said. "But I've learned that resilience and hard work can take you further than privilege ever could." Jonathan, witnessing Emily's poise, felt a deep sense of pride. He realized that he, too, had to stand firm against those who couldn't see beyond her past. Slowly, He began cutting ties with people who didn't respect the woman he loved or the values he now held dear. As time went on, Emily's confidence blossomed. Her art gained national recognition, and she began hosting workshops for aspiring artists who faced similar struggles to her own. Each success reinforced her belief that she was capable of creating a meaningful and fulfilling life on her own terms. Jonathan, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. His foundation grew rapidly, helping hundreds of individuals find their voices through art. For the first time in years, he felt truly content, not because of his wealth, but because of the lives he was touching. One day, Emily unveiled a special piece at a joint charity gala hosted by her and Jonathan's foundation. The painting depicted two hands, one reaching down to lift the other. It was titled Second Chances. As the crowd erupted in applause, Jonathan turned to Emily and whispered, "You've given me more than a second chance. You've given me a new life." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "And you reminded me that I was always worthy of one." Their journey had been anything but conventional, but together they had found something far more valuable than material wealth: purpose, love, and the courage to rebuild. A year after the gala, Jonathan and Emily stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new community art center they had built together. The center, aptly named New Horizons, was a safe space for artists from all walks of life to explore their creativity, showcase their talents, and find hope in the power of expression. The event was filled with laughter, applause, and stories of triumph. Jonathan looked around at the vibrant community they had fostered and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For once, his success wasn't measured by profit margins or stock prices. It was measured in smiles, connections, and lives transformed. Emily, too, had come full circle. Her work was no longer just a means of survival. It had become a way to inspire others. At the Art Center, she mentored young creators, encouraging them to find their voices just as she had found hers. As the crowd cheered, Jonathan and Emily exchanged a knowing glance. Their journey had been unpredictable, full of challenges and growth, but it had led them to a life richer than they ever imagined. Their story held a profound lesson. Life's greatest wealth isn't found in possessions, but in connection, compassion, and the courage to rebuild when all seems lost. Jonathan learned that success without purpose is hollow. He had spent years chasing an ideal that left him unfulfilled, only to discover that true happiness came from giving back and embracing authenticity. Emily's journey taught her that no matter how far one falls, it's possible to rise again. Her resilience was a reminder that the past doesn't define a person. It's how they choose to move forward that truly matters. Together, they proved that love and understanding can bridge even the widest gaps between people, creating a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the willingness to grow. As the ceremony concluded, Jonathan addressed the audience with heartfelt words. Each of us has the power to change not only our own lives, but the lives of those around us. Whether it's offering a helping hand, sharing a kind word, or simply believing in someone who has lost their way, we can all make a difference. Emily reminded me of that, and I hope her story reminds all of you. Emily added, "Life will knock you down sometimes. But no matter how broken you feel, remember, you are not your circumstances. You are your resilience, your passion, and your dreams. And when someone offers you a second chance, don't be afraid to take it. You might just find the life you've been searching for." As the crowd dispersed and the sun set over the horizon, Jonathan and Emily walked hand in hand through the Art Center, their hearts full. They had built something beautiful, not just a physical space, but the lives they had touched and the love they had cultivated. Their journey was a testament to the transformative power of second chances, and they knew this was only the beginning of what they could achieve together. In the end, they weren't just rescuing each other. They were creating a life neither of them could have imagined on their own.